The Power of Love. While the phrase might be best known to film fans as the title of the catchy Huey Lewis and the News song written for 1985's Back to the Future, it has another important distinction in cinema history. It's also the name of the very first ever 3D movie shown to audiences, a silent film screened at the Ambassador Hotel Theater in September of 1922. To an audience not that far removed from the advent of motion pictures in general, you'd imagine this new technological advance would have been especially mind-blowing. And yet, the film, which also allowed viewers to choose from two different endings to watch based on which lens of the required red-green glasses they looked through, was not a success, and 3D films remained mostly an experimental novelty throughout the next few decades. It wasn't until the success of two 3D movies in 1953, the noir thriller Man in the Dark and, more notably, the Vincent Price horror classic House of Wax, that the format enjoyed its first wave of mainstream popularity, with a number of 3D films to follow, particularly in the sci-fi and horror genres. This was a short-lived burst of excitement, however, as the 3D fad quickly died out, at least on a major studio level, only a couple years later. Throughout the 60s and 70s, 3D would remain mostly reserved only for the occasional exploitation fair looking to drum up a little extra business. It would enjoy another brief mainstream resurgence in the early 80s, thanks once again to the world of horror cinema, with sequels like Friday the 13th Part 3, Jaws 3D, and Amityville 3D, all using their third film status to cleverly indulge in the gimmick. But it didn't take long for this wave to also die off. And throughout the second half of the 80s and entirety of the 90s, 3D was primarily relegated to theme park attractions, such as Epcot's Michael Jackson sci-fi adventure Captain EO, and nature documentaries developed for exhibition in the newly emerging IMAX theaters found at museums and science centers around the world. By the early 2000s, though, the technological leaps being made in the realm of 3D were becoming more and more enticing to studios, filmmakers, and audiences alike. The traditional red-blue lens anaglyph method had thankfully been replaced with a more visually enticing polarization method, and new digital HD 3D cameras made on-screen depth of field look more immersive than ever before. Films like the animated Polar Express and the remake of My Bloody Valentine admirably showed off the new possibilities of the format. But it's without a doubt 2009's Avatar, featuring mind-blowing new 3D technology pioneered by filmmaker James Cameron, that ushered in the gimmick's most dominant phase yet. After Avatar became the highest-grossing film of all time, and its groundbreaking 3D technology also helped Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland cross the $1 billion box office threshold the next year, it suddenly seemed as if 3D was unavoidable during any trip to the multiplex. If you were putting out a big movie and wanted to be taken seriously as a potential blockbuster, you had to have a 3D version. Even though audiences would again eventually tire of the gimmick, whether due to the increased ticket prices of a 3D screening or simply the fatigue of too many 3D movies, there's no doubt the next half-decade saw the gimmick utilized more than ever before, with every major studio presenting their biggest efforts in the 3D format. And even some smaller companies saw an opportunity to perhaps generate additional interest in what might otherwise be a harder sell to an audience. Say, for instance, an attempt to reboot a cult favorite comic character, whose last attempt at movie stardom had been a notoriously maligned 1995 failed blockbuster, starring one of the world's biggest action icons. This time around, though, it would be the character that was the star, not the actor. And if that wasn't enough, it would also be presented in 3 thrilling dimensions. The year is 2012, and British studio DNA Films is set to finally right the wrongs of a previous attempt to adapt a beloved British comic book property, with Dredd 3D. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. The sound of another failed movie launch means that we are back with another episode of Failure to Franchise, the show dedicated to some of Hollywood's most infamous mistakes, missteps, and misfires. This is Trev.
And I'm Chris, and this is Judgment Time.
Are you ready, Chris?
I am ready.
You sound ready.
Excellent.
Thank you. We'll be here all week, everyone.
Yeah.
Tip your waitress. Yes, so we are back with the second episode in a little 2-month special here. Judgment was coming to November for us, and so this time we are covering Dredd, 2012's second attempt to bring a cult classic comic character to the big screen. But before we get there, Chris, I got a couple corrections. I want to get some correction corner material out of the way right up top.
Okay.
So first of all, last time when we did our Judge Dredd episode, you went on a little, I feel like completely unfair anti-James Remar rant. And I stuck up for him a little bit. And in doing so, I mentioned that he originally played Hicks in Aliens before being replaced. And then I said, well, obviously Paxton was better. Of course, I know that Michael Biehn played Hicks, not Bill Paxton. That was just a slip of the nerd tongue, because obviously, I don't know about you, as much as I love Michael Biehn, and he has some great sci-fi kind of characters, when I think of Aliens, my brain tends to default to Paxton because he's the more memorable character to me.
Of course.
But I don't want my nerd cred to get completely taken away. And yeah, I don't think Remar would have been good at all in the Hicks role, or I'm sorry, in the Bill Paxton role.
Yeah.
But
he's actually not. He's actually not good at all in like anything. But yeah, that's fine.
Oh, you are insane. And then secondly, because we covered Judge Dredd last time, and I talked about how, it's a character that's way more popular in the UK than it is in America, and it's just got a little bit of a cult following in America. I had some friends who were upset that we never mentioned the Anthrax song, I Am the Law, which is a song that the metal band Anthrax did, which, they try to point out that is one of the... in terms of American pop culture, maybe one of the areas that Dredd is most known for is that song. I didn't really bring it up because I'm not the biggest fan of the song. I actually kind of think it's a somewhat silly song and doesn't really do much for me. But I agree with them that it is a part of Judge Dredd history, and maybe we should have talked about it. So to make it up to them, I thought we could just give the song its due, and let's just play a little bit of it for our audience here so they can hear what the song is like. So here's just a little bit of I Am the Law by Anthrax. Okay, so that's about it, as much as I think we need to hear. So hopefully my friends are happy, and you got your little Anthrax nod there.
Good.
Yep. So Dredd, Chris, what do you think?
Well, I guess first let's.
You want to tell our listeners a little bit about the film?
Yeah. It's directed by Pete Travis, written by Alex Garland.
We'll throw some asterisks on these already.
Yes, big time. It has a budget of $45 million. Domestic take was $13.4 million, and worldwide, $41 million. So not even the budget that it was posed to make. So again, as we like to say, why did this fail? Obviously, dollars and cents. It bombed horribly, quite terribly. So
yeah, well, that's at least why it doesn't have a sequel today.
Yes.
Why it failed is a bigger discussion, which we'll get into.
Correct. But yeah, as Trev had said, this is the second attempt at the cinematic take on Judge Dredd.
Overall, how surprised are you that they even tried to do a second Dredd movie? And not really that long after the first one, right? I mean, it's not immediately after, but the stink of the Stallone one definitely stuck around for a while, right? So are you shocked that they went back this well, or?
Well, maybe a little of A and B, because first of all, I had said on our older episode or other episode that I had never seen Judge Dredd, and it kind of maybe it stayed in some people's memories, but it wasn't really culturally relevant, so to speak, anymore. I don't know, but I feel like this one. And especially we'll get into the way that the film progresses, but it does feel like it is a time capsule in filmmaking technique, dark and gritty, and a little bit of technology usage. So I think sign of the time that it was ready to unveil itself, and I think maybe Dredd was maybe a perfect character to plop into that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's interesting because I was thinking about this, is it that surprising that they tried to do another Dredd film? And I guess at this time, you have to remember, in 2012, which means they're filming, they're ramping up work on this in 2010 and 2011. And this is when the MCU is really starting to, it's starting to become clear how big it's going to be. Right? So not only are we in a post-Dark Knight world, but we're also seeing the ramp up to Avengers and everyone suddenly getting very excited about superhero and comic book properties as a cinematic venture to make money again. And so obviously I'm at that point, just as happened, we brought this up before, with Judge Dredd, just as happened after Tim Burton's Batman, suddenly every studio and every production company is looking at which characters they already have the rights to that they forgot they did, or which ones they can snatch up the rights to. I do think that the thing that's surprising about them going for Dredd in particular, it's like, a movie where they obviously want it to be kind of an international hit and not just something that's for the UK. Is that, as we said, it's a character that's really only well known on that side of the Atlantic, right? It still has never been a big deal in America. And in fact, in America, the only thing that people know about Judge Dredd is, it was that bad Sylvester Stallone movie.
Right.
It's one thing when you make like a bad Spider-Man movie, but everyone still knows what Spider-Man is and gets it, and they're like, well, that's too bad that they made a bad one, but we'll wait for the good one. With Judge Dredd, it's a different kind of attitude here, right? And I think we'll talk about that. I think that really does play into the overall performance of this film, in that a movie comes out called Dredd, people see like some images of it, see him in the helmet again, they might just be like, what is that, like a sequel to that Stallone movie? Or, the character's not well known enough for it to really feel like, oh, thank God they're getting it right this time. I don't know if that was the attitude that audiences had. More is probably just pure curiosity of, why is this a thing again?
Or like, what is this either? Like, I mean, looking back at some of the marketing, which we'll get into, but it just seems kind of, it doesn't do a really good job at like conveying what it is. It just kind of seems like action movie, which in retrospect, it was a little bit more special than that.
Well, and it's hard to sell too, right? Because I mean, right off the bat, we should say that, and this is something we will obviously talk about because we had to talk about last time. First of all, you get a much smaller star, physically and just like fame wise. Karl Urban is certainly he's a known actor, but I would say even especially back in this time, way less known than he is today. And even today, I wouldn't call him like a megastar, like on the Stallone level.
No.
But also, he keeps the helmet on the entire film, so his face is obscured the whole film. So you can't even sell the film on his like star power, even if you wanted to, or if he had it. And yeah, like you said, it's a smaller budget level, so the advertising is smaller in general. Yeah, a lot of challenges for this. But, why did they go for it? I mean, obviously, I'm sure the people involved in Dredd, I know like the 2000 AD people, they just had constantly had a bug up their butt about how bad that first one turned out,
Right.
and obviously they wanted to kind of like save this character. And as we said, a lot of people who grew up with the character had this affinity for that book. It's a book that's been around since the late 70s in the UK. And I think there's a lot of filmmakers who just wanted to see this character done justice finally.
Pun unintended.
Yeah. And we should just briefly talk about the Alex Garland of it all, in terms of what we like to talk about, like what are the elements that lead up to this. So Alex Garland was definitely a rising star in kind of the screenwriting realm at this point. He kind of became first known to like us film fans for his work on, like, he wrote the novel The Beach, which was then adapted into into a film. I believe he also did the screenplay for that. But he goes on to write the screenplays for 28 Days Later and Sunshine, Never Let Me Go. So he's definitely getting some acclaim. And in fact, now today he's kind of recognized as one of our great like sci-fi filmmakers for stuff that follows after this. But we'll talk about how Dredd is actually a very important piece of that puzzle. In fact, in recent years, we've learned that it might even be more important of a piece than we initially thought.
Yeah. Not much to say about Pete Travis, the director.
No, not too much.
which is kind of unfortunate to say. He supposedly directed this, and he doesn't really have any other credits to his name other than TV stuff.
Yeah, well, I mean, before this, he did direct some films before this, including Vantage Point, which I remember as a film.
Vantage Point. Yeah.
I've never seen Vantage Point, but I certainly remember seeing the trailer for Vantage Point at the theater multiple times in the lead up to it. And I have certainly seen multiple copies of Vantage Point at dollar stores and Five Belows ever since that movie came out.
You are ruthless. You are a ruthless son of a bitch.
I said I haven't seen it. It could be good. It could be surprisingly great. I don't know.
I saw it. I know I've seen it, and that's my review.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then there's also a little bit. Well, and again, there was another film that was being made at the same time as this movie, which we'll have to talk about as well, because it's always like a piece of the. Whenever people talk about this film, it inevitably gets compared to something else. So I guess maybe there's just something in the ether at this time of people wanting these kind of like scaled back films and everything, these scaled back action, or it seemed like the right time for them to kind of take off. And that is one thing I'll say about this is that not only is this film clearly. Obviously, a big part of it is it's a reaction to the Stallone movie. In a lot of ways, it's them definitely trying to right the wrongs of that film. But it also just feels like a reaction to the kind of comic book movies that were coming out at the time. Would you agree with that?
Oh, 100%. I mean, this is it's got that little bit of a post-Dark Knight syndrome. We've mentioned a couple times in some episodes of the dark and gritty of it all. But in this case, which we'll get to, it actually benefits the source material. So it does work to some respect, for sure.
It's that, and then it's also like kind of counter programming to the Marvel stuff too,
Yes.
right? So it's
Yes,
like this is at the point where everyone's trying to figure out like what's the right take on all of this. Do we go for like the very serious? Do we go for the more bright and cheery? And again, it should be dictated by character and all that stuff. But yeah, and then I guess let's talk about Karl Urban. We already mentioned him, but can you think back to this era? Where were you on Karl Urban at the time? Were you aware of him? Was he somebody that you gave a crap about in terms of like, oh, I want to see that new Karl Urban film? Like, what did his involvement in this mean to you?
Well, as we all know, I was like 5 years old in 2012. So, so Karl Urban was just kind of a footnote in my film history. He was Éomer in The Lord of the Rings, and he was Bones in Star Trek 2009. Which controversial, but it might be my favorite Star Trek movie.
I really like the 2009 Star Trek, and to be fair, I also really like Star Trek Beyond.
Same here.
Star Trek Into Darkness, no, thank you.
Fair enough, but like, and also let me just back that up, saying that I love those especially those two, but the first Star Trek. I've never been a Star Trek guy, and that's probably why it worked for me, because it was made for people that weren't into Star Trek. Does that make sense? So yeah. But sidebar on that, I did recognize that Karl Urban was like super fucking fun. Like he was just a good screen presence. Like when he's on screen, you're watching him. But not really the big star. Even like you said now, like yes, he has a starring role in The Boys, but I mean he's probably the best part. Him and whoever plays at Homelander, I can't remember his name.
Anthony Starr.
Yes, they're definitely the best of that show. But at the time in 2011, 2012, Karl Urban was just kind of another actor that I knew of. How about you?
Yeah. I think I knew more of Karl Urban. You were, but back in 2012, you were a huge Olivia Thirlby fan, though, right?
Big
like
fan.
You were just posters all over your walls, and
she have posters now.
No, I certainly was aware of Karl Urban because everything he was doing was kind of falling into that nerd realm that we tend to exist in. Like you said, I was actually. I actually think he might have been the MVP of that first Star Trek film. Because I remember, I was just really surprised when they cast him. Like you said, I knew him from Lord of the Rings. I knew him from being a heavy in the second Bourne film. And I knew him from being in Chronicles of Riddick. So I kind of had this awareness of Karl Urban as this guy who's, the big tough guy, right? He's he's one of those tough guys. And then when I cast him as Bones, who think of as the doctor character, I was kind of taken aback by that. And then I was just very impressed by I want to say he might be the best performance in that film just because he's doing this perfect impersonation of DeForest Kelley, but not to the level of it just being an impression. Like he still manages to build his own character and make the role his own in a way that I think, everyone is great in that cast actually. But he really stuck out to me as someone who I didn't expect him to actually kind of capture DeForest Kelley's kind of delivery style and everything. And he did it really well. But made a new version of the character. Yeah,
he doesn't come off like an SNL costume performance.
Yes, exactly.
Not that anybody else does in that movie, but I understand what you're saying for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a trickier character to kind of try and breathe new life into, right? Like, not to take anything away from Zachary Quinto, who is very good as Spock, but it's kind of easy to do Spock, right? I think Karl Urban had a bigger challenge in front of him.
Zachary Quinto just canceled for next episode, by the way. He's not going to be a part of the guest. He was going to be on the podcast, but he's offended, and I just got a text. So, you know what? I'm going to call him back up and say, buddy, I watched every episode of Heroes. You owe this to me. Oh, my God. You watched every episode of Heroes? Well, to be fair, I did not watch remember they brought it back? So you're lying. Well, I didn't. Whatever that second iteration was. I watched every version of the show that he was on. I stuck through all 4 seasons, and I'll actually say what many people don't know is that the 4th season was actually not that bad. It was like an improvement and seemed like it was getting back on track, but too little, too late. Yeah, that was unfortunately a casualty of the writer's strike in season 2. But it's not just the writers. I think it's 2-pronged. It's the writer's strike just destroyed season 2, right? But also that season 1 built up to a
Peter Seiler fight, and then it
Yeah.
didn't deliver.
Yeah.
Because I always thought about how if that season finale of season 1 just actually had an awesome Seiler Peter fight, you could just still enjoy that season as like a standalone thing and like
Totally.
not worry about. But they didn't even deliver that, so yeah, it just ultimately like completely evaporates.
Didn't
from
they just
your
like
consciousness.
meet up in a park outside? And then it
Like
just,
most of the fight was like off screen. You like it was like the way
Right.
they go flying out of a window, and then you hear like a bunch of punches outside, but they didn't have the budget to show it. you know?
Man, that show had so much promise. Like, I haven't thought about Heroes in years, and right now I'm just getting flashbacks. Like, that show was, man, like the whole ad campaign, save the cheerleader, save the world.
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean,
man,
that show was
a
supposed to
good
be,
show.
and for a brief moment, it was like the heir apparent to like Lost, right?
Yeah,
that kind of like
totally.
cultural phenomenon. Yeah. So we'll save this for our Heroes cast.
For sure.
Long story short, this is right around the time where I was starting to realize that I was a Karl Urban fan. Right, he was just doing enough stuff to where I was becoming more aware of him. And I will say that, and revisiting this film, and then just finishing season 2 of The Boys, which I know you watched recently as well.
Yep.
I'm actually kind of surprised, and I want to hear your thoughts on this if you agree. You know, like right now, Timothy Olyphant is having like a big moment, right? He's getting like a lot of attention online, and people finally starting to catch up to how awesome he is and talking about, oh yeah, he was great on Justified and Deadwood, and then people are so excited that he ended up in The Mandalorian.
Yep.
And I'm actually surprised that Karl Urban, to me, it feels like he hasn't had that kind of moment yet. I'm surprised he's not a bigger deal online, because he's got like he's got the rugged good looks. As you said, he seems like a very fun person whenever you see him doing interviews and stuff. He does all these like very nerdy, cool properties. I'm actually shocked he's not a bigger deal, even in this small realm that we're talking about of like just geek fandom.
You know what Karl Urban is? He's Eric Bana. Those two guys I always put in the same kind of category, that they are just awesome when they're in something and nobody talks about them. And they just disappear for years and years until, Eric Bana is in Funny People? That's crazy. And like, like they just kind of pop up. I remember thinking that with when like, and again, I'm bringing up Eric Bana because I think I don't know, they just feel that way to me always. I've always thought that. And it was like when Troy came out, and like the unsung hero of Troy, even though that movie's terrible, is Eric Bana. Like Hector was the fucking man, and then Eric Bana just like went away, and he's never in anything. And I think Karl Urban and Eric Bana like had this moment in time to be household names, to be A-listers, but they are destined to stay their entire career in like this B realm. And they are so much more talented than that. They should be A-listers. They should be in the realm of like I always go back to Tom Cruise, like, you know what I mean? But like they deserve so much more of a career than they have, even though it's been great for both. And like Karl Urban right now, like again, he's in The Boys and he's getting all this acclaim, but The Boys lasts for a couple weeks. Nobody talks about it again for 2 years, and that's Karl Urban.
Yeah.
So,
He's just sitting around waiting for that potential 4th Star Trek film that might happen someday, I guess.
Yeah. Directed by Quentin Tarantino, apparently.
All right, so let's briefly talk about the writing of this film, and then we'll get into it, because we always try to like lead up to it. So yes, as we mentioned, Alex Garland is the writer in this film. He actually starts working on this film and writing it in 2008, and his initial drafts, not surprisingly, this is a film that goes through a lot of rewrites and some changes. And he's kind of acknowledged since that his first draft was a very kind of big, epic story pitting Dredd up against Judge Death.
Yep.
I talked about Judge Death last time. I think to most Judge Dredd fans, he is, he's the Joker to Judge Dredd's Batman. He is the arch enemy. But as I said, he's a very kind of... first of all, he's going to have to be like a CGI creation, because he's essentially a zombie ghost that wears like a judge's outfit, comes from another universe where he's murdered everybody.
Yep.
An odd character to start with, especially on this budget level, but also just it requires like a big kind of epic story. So at a certain point, Garland realizes that this story is just too big for this budget, and also probably just requires too much knowledge of like the world from the audience.
Yep.
So he kind of puts that aside, and then he starts thinking about adapting some other kind of famous Judge Dredd storylines, such as Democracy from 1986 and Origins from 2006. Origins is a great one, which actually goes back and kind of tells the history of the judge system and gives Judge Dredd's whole backstory. But he eventually just kind of puts that aside as well, and ultimately the decision he makes, and we'll talk about it, what we think this was a smart decision or not. He'll probably can already figure out where we're heading with this, but he decides on a very simple, just a day in the life story about Dredd. What if you just make a movie that shows what is one day like for this character? who, as we've said in our last episode, hopefully people listen to that one as well, because I think we're going to treat this episode as kind of a companion piece.
For sure.
So not to reiterate exactly what Judge Dredd is, but just the basics of it is that this is a future society where in these mega cities, which in this film is just described as stretching from Boston to Washington. I noticed they kind of made the smaller version of Mega City 1. But these mega cities just filled, millions of people. The governmental system in charge is the judges, who patrol the streets and act as judge, jury, and executioner. And Judge Dredd is kind of one of the more well-known of them. And so Garland says, what if we just saw what a normal day is like for him? And so we get Dredd, which is a pretty big difference than the Stallone one. And I guess we'll talk more about those kind of comparisons and what we think about the direction on the other side of this.
800 million people living in the ruin of the old world. Only one thing fighting for order in the chaos. The men and women of the Hall of Justice.
Peachtrees is the manufacturing base for all the slow-mo in Mega City 1.
You know how often we get a judge up in Peachtrees?
Well, you got one now.
She has control of everything. Levels 1 to 200.
This is Mama. Somewhere in this block are 2 judges.
That's not good.
I want him dead.
We're gonna have to go through him. Rookie, you ready?
Yeah.
You look ready.
Fire!
Judgment time.
Let's finish this.
Mama is not the law. I'm the law. Negotiations over. The sentence is death.
The future United States is a dystopic, irradiated wasteland known as the Cursed Earth. On the East Coast lies Mega City 1, a violent metropolis with 800 million residents and 17,000 serious crimes reported daily. The only force for order are the judges, who act as judge, jury, and executioner. Inside Peachtrees, a 200-story slum tower block, the drug lord known as Mama rules with a terrifying iron fist. Here, her gang produces and distributes a new reality-altering drug called slow-mo. Today, Judge Dredd is tasked with evaluating new recruit Cassandra Anderson, a powerful psychic. When Dredd and Anderson are called to Peachtrees for a disturbance, they get wind of Mama's notorious dealings. This causes a total building lockdown, trapping our heroes inside. Now, Dredd and his trainee must fight their way to the top of the block in order to take down Mama and her violent gang, who are ordered to kill them at any cost. So yeah, that's Dredd.
Yep, Dredd 3D.
Oh yes, sorry, Dredd 3D. I apologize.
As yeah. Now, do you ever still call it that, or?
Obviously not.
Yeah, so we should mention you alluded earlier to the talk of like the technology behind the film.
Yeah.
This film was released to theaters as Dredd 3D, and oftentimes you will still see it online, kind of listed as that. And so that's like a somewhat forgotten element of this film, I think, is that this was I was about to say a big 3D release. No, but it was definitely a 3D release, and it was filmed for 3D. So that was also a big part of their sell on this movie.
Well, and that's the thing that kind of, I mean, we said the budget was 45 mil. Knowing that it was filmed in 3D in the smack dab in the middle of the 3D craze, I can see a lot of that going towards the technology. So, I mean, regardless, it still made garbage money. So I don't think it would have mattered at this point. But it was maybe a little bit of an investment that was probably not so. Yeah,
because this is not a post convert job.
No.
This was not post conversion. They filmed this in native 3D using like those kind of new super expensive cameras that were becoming all the rage in Hollywood at the time. They still saved some money by filming in South Africa. This is filmed entirely in Cape Town, which you can actually, I think, just tell looking at the movie.
Definitely.
Well, let's actually just get into it then. So here we have a Dredd, and as we said, like last episode, we looked at Judge Dredd, which for those who don't remember, our ultimate take on that was that starts off really well and then just gets worse and worse as it goes along. But we did talk about how, it actually did capture the look of the comic very well, other than, some small things and to me a big thing in terms of the helmet or whatever. But I mean, the universe of or the world of Mega City 1 looked just dead on. One of the very first things I'm struck with in this movie, because right off the top, we kind of are thrown right into an action scene, is a completely new look. And I don't just mean, it's cheaper. But suddenly, and you mentioned The Dark Knight. I don't know if this is like the Dark Knight of it all, or it's just them trying to separate themselves from the Stallone film, or it's just the budget. I'm sure it's actually probably all of those things.
Yeah.
But in the first few minutes, you go, wow, this just does not look like the Judge Dredd comics. This looks like today.
Yeah. It just looks like a grimy, dusty city. And I do no disrespect to Johannesburg, by the way. No. all of our listeners in Joburg. Sorry about that. That's not what I meant. But it definitely feels like now-ish. But to that sense, it's different. But I did find the opening pretty great. I'm gonna jump back a little bit back and forth through the discussion about Judge Dredd. I think we both will, obviously, but I just wanted to say up front because it was my first time ever seeing Judge Dredd. I've seen Dredd, like this Dredd 2012. I've seen now, I think 5 times. But the other one, what did I say? I went into Dredd all these years without knowing any real knowledge about the character. Just recently, when we did our Judge Dredd episode, is where Trev kind of gave me an education. So that's what's been fun about this viewing of Dredd, is now I have this other realm of history and comparison knowledge in my head going forward. So in a weird way, I love the look of Judge Dredd. I really love the look of Mega City 1. It was so awesome to me. This one is kind of boring to look at, but it's very simple and it's to the point. Especially because of Karl Urban has an opening monologue over everything that explains the world and this and that. And I do find it's really tight. It's very good at explaining things right off the bat. It's not flashy. It's not in your face like the other one was. But I did find it was like a great blend of like real environments and CGI enhancements. I do like that, but definitely far from the flashy comic 90s movie.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think there's like pluses and minuses to this. And ultimately, I think I fall more into the plus category because if you are a huge fan of the comics, or if you're like me and a more casual fan, but you've read still a good amount of it, it is jarring. And I remember finding it jarring. And in fact, let me actually back up and tell my a little backstory of my interest in this film in general when it came out. I was like not excited about this movie at all when it was announced, and even after like the initial trailers. I remember not being that impressed by the first teaser I saw for it. And I think it was really the stink of the Stallone one that was like sticking with me, and I was just like, another Dredd movie, whatever. They're probably just going to get it wrong again, right? And I was actually at San Diego Comic-Con the year this film came out, and they were doing a special advanced screening of it there. And me and my buddies we actually had the opportunity to go to that screening, and we were like, nah, like we were pretty sure it was going to be bad.
Right.
And I remember it was at Comic-Con where the day after that screening, the buzz started to kind of spread around the show floor, and you were hearing people talk about how like, no, that was actually really good. And that's where my interest started to be piqued. Like suddenly it was like, wait, everyone's saying that was actually pretty awesome. So I started paying more attention to it. Then, cut to a couple months later when it actually gets released and going to see it. And yeah, like in those first few minutes, just being struck by, wow, this doesn't look like the world of Judge Dredd. Like it doesn't have the futuristic vehicles. The people aren't dressed in very outlandish costumes or outfits. Everything looks like either today or tomorrow. But ultimately, that's why I say pluses and minuses, because the interesting thing is it does suddenly make this universe feel more plausible.
Yeah. And
it feels like, wow, this is something that actually we could be heading towards, and it could be like really close to happening. It does feel like, even though this whole idea of the judges and everything is obviously an extreme satire, it's just by making everything look more like our world, it really gives this like a sense of realism and plausibility that obviously you couldn't get from like the Stallone film. And that comes down to the vehicles that we see in this first car chase are just regular cars. We have footage of like citizens riding, and I was taken aback by how they're just wearing kind of like brand name shirts that we would recognize today. They're just dressed in like regular clothes. And even the Judge Dredd costume, which I think it's kind of cool how in this version, instead of like the big, eagle on his like shoulder pad and the very like elaborate kind of comic booky looking costume, he just looks like a riot cop.
Yeah, totally.
It looks like a very practical armor kind of outfit that a cop would wear, being thrust into the sort of situations he is.
No, completely agreed. It is. You're right. It's the plus and minus of it all. I really like the look of Dredd, but again, it was because it was like the first iteration that I've ever seen. It's funny you say. I was at Comic-Con the same year, so I think that's where my interest peaked for it as well, because I just didn't know what the fuck it was. And then I think I saw footage at it, probably in Hall H or something, and I was like, oh man, that looks awesome.
Yeah. So I just wanted to get that out of the way and talk about like the obvious like stylistic differences. But we have a lot to talk about this film. But let's just say right off the top, let's just get this out of the way. What are your overall thoughts on Dredd 2012? Do you like it as much as the Stallone film? A little less? Where are you falling on this?
So I don't know if you heard, but I said I've seen this movie 5 times. I love this movie. I unabashedly love this movie. I loved it the first time I saw it, second, third, fourth, fifth. It's fantastic. I even looking at it, which we'll get into, which is some things I actually think it. I don't know if the satire is exactly there as much as maybe the '90s version was, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, but I want to talk about that eventually.
Yeah, we'll get into that.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to say, like, up front, like this, I think this movie is fucking awesome. And I want to say that me and you both saw it in theaters, and like we said, this was made in 3D. I actually still to this day, and I've said it since the beginning I saw it, was that Dredd was one of my favorite 3D experiences in movies. I thought it was done fantastically, and especially because there's a certain effect that happens with the drug that is a main plot point called slow-mo, and it is just spellbinding. It's awesome. I love it. But yeah, no, movie's great. Fucking sweet. End of episode.
Yeah. I mean, I try to avoid being too hyperbolic on here.
Yeah.
But I kind of consider Dredd like an unsung modern masterpiece.
Yeah.
Like, is that, I'm with you. I think I've seen this more than 5 times. I know I saw it twice in the theater. When I initially got the Blu-ray, I was really excited to like revisit it again. And then I've watched it a few times since. And then I was really excited to sit down this week and watch it. This movie's awesome. In fact, in terms of films we've done on the show so far, I like John Carter quite a bit. I like Friday the 13th, but this to me is the best film we've watched so far.
Oh, yeah.
And I think we should just establish now that we should just make this like a gold standard until it gets beaten. We should just hold everything after this to the Dredd test.
Yeah.
Is this movie as good as Dredd? Because right now this is as good as it gets for films we've done. And this is definitely probably the ultimate example of one where I'm sure you would agree. I'm just very frustrated that we're even covering this film, because in my perfect world, we would have 4 more of these by now.
Like, I hate that, I put this I edit the podcast together, and then I put a little cover photo, and our cover photo on our logo is us with like shaking our heads, like we're like, what the fuck? How did this happen? You know what I mean? And it sucks that I have to put that image over top of an image from this movie. Because
this time it does feel really appropriate, because that image is more like us. Like, I can't believe everybody like slept on this.
Oh,
film.
I guess so. Yeah,
right?
That's okay, fair enough. I do like that. Then. Makes me feel better.
Yeah, no, I mean, we're gonna get into like specifics, but I will just say like, I agree. There's things we'll talk about in terms of one of the big questions that sometimes hovers around this film is did it need to be a Judge Dredd movie based on the way the story is told and everything? And actually, I have very particular thoughts on that.
Okay.
But I will say that ultimately I love this film because not only is it an amazing action film in terms of just how simplistic it is and how, economical it is in its storytelling, but I will say that for me, I do think this is a character that way, way, way more so than the Stallone film just gets the character right.
Yeah.
And I want to come back to what something Garland said about writing the film. And this goes back to, we mentioned in our Judge Dredd episode that one of the problems was we said that was the wrong Judge Dredd story to tell, because we didn't want to see a story about Dredd becoming a better person or like finding his humanity and just going on this big character growth epic. And so Garland, in talking about the decision to turn his story into a day in the life story about Dredd, He's quoted as saying, "I didn't think Dredd could have a great epiphany, but there is definitely a change in him over the course of the movie. He makes a very clear statement at the beginning of the film, which he then contradicts at the end. That's about as far as the shift goes."
Yep.
And it says that he was trying to closely follow that of a comic book character who undergoes only small personality changes over a lengthy period of time. And that's exactly what I love about this film, is that this is not like the Judge Dredd story to end all Judge Dredd stories. It's just the story about what seems to be a fairly regular day for him. And he said you get just a little bit of a character growth in him, but really, let me ask you, who would you consider the main character of this film? Because I have thoughts on this too. Do you think Dredd is the main character of this film, or do you think it's Cadet Anderson?
No, it's Anderson for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Anderson for sure. She has the arc. And Dredd doesn't really, I mean, like you said, it's funny you that quote that you said. I had a similar one from Alex Garland saying what John Wagner, the creator of Dredd, does in the comic is he has Dredd evolve in a way that a glacier moves. You look a year later and something actually has shifted, but like not too much. And Dredd's there to almost be a character foil for Anderson, almost more so than she is for him. And yeah, no, it's Anderson all the way. Dredd is there to show you what Anderson could be like if she keeps up with this. You know?
Yeah. Yes. Dredd represents the side of the system that Anderson could potentially either fall victim to or start to change.
Totally.
And that is what Dredd ultimately represents in this film, is seeing what is the effect she has on him by the end of the film. And I think that's just like a perfect way to use his character. Yes, the film is named after him. Yes, he probably has maybe more screen time than her, but as you said, she's the one who has the character arc. We kind of are following her. She's our audience surrogate because she's being introduced to this world of the judges as it's her first day on the job.
Are required to carry identification at all times.
A rookie judge on assessment is likely to be involved in armed combat. 1-5 don't survive the first day. You may be required to carry out on-the-spot executions of convicted felons.
Yes, sir.
Incorrect sentencing is an automatic fail. Disobeying a direct order from your assessment officer is an automatic fail. Losing your primary weapon or having it taken from you is an automatic fail.
Yes, sir.
You ready, rookie?
I am.
Mandatory vehicle check.
Your assessment starts now.
And I just think that's like a brilliant use of having him be this kind of, not off to the side, but as like this more kind of immovable object. And this comes down to why the helmet is important to me. So you and I had this debate last time. Sure. And watching this film really crystallized it for me, and hearing something that Karl Urban said. So first of all, this has been a story that's been told many times. It's part of the reason I kind of started to fall in love with Karl Urban even more, is hearing that when he went to meet for this film, they had already decided that because the other film had gotten so much flack for the removing of the helmet, they had already made the decision, well, this time we'll get that right. He won't take off the helmet. So when they met with Karl Urban, they kind of said, well, just so you know, if you'd agree to star in this, we're never going to see your face. We're actually going to ask you to keep the helmet on the whole time. And apparently Karl Urban's response was, if I thought you were going to ask me to take the helmet off, I wouldn't have even taken this meeting.
No, that's sweet.
He was all about that. Like he grew up on the character too. He said when he was like a teenager growing up in New Zealand, he was introduced to the comic by somebody he worked with at like a pizza emporium he worked at there. So this is a character that meant something to him too. And he wanted to get it right. And he says that to him, the reason that the helmet should stay on is that he is supposed to be the faceless representative of the law. And I think that's part of his enigma. And it was exactly that. I started to think about, you were talking about how, like, does it matter if the helmet comes off? And I gave up my defense of it last time, but this film really kind of put it more into like concrete terms for me, of saying that, bear with me here in a second, but like, there's that old saying, eyes are the window to the soul.
Yep.
And that's totally true. And that's the thing, is like, by showing you Dredd's face, and particularly by having it be an actor we all know, and yes, I mean, you do remove that from when you watch a film to a certain degree, but it's kind of hard, especially with megastars. So once that helmet comes off in the previous film, he's no longer Judge Dredd to me. He's Sylvester Stallone.
Yeah.
And in this film, he is just always Dredd. And not only that, but because I can't see his eyes, as Dredd, he is nothing more than a symbol of this system. And that's, to me, why the helmet does matter, and why I think I do advocate for, no, that actually is an important character piece, because that's what he's meant to be, right? He's less a person than he's just the ultimate symbol of what has happened to the society, and the fact that these judges are like overly extreme, overly harsh, and he's like the ultimate representation of that. So does that, like, do you feel your like opinion starting to shift on that, or
it did? And honestly, it started to shift when we recorded the other episode, because when you said, well, maybe that's just not the way you make a Judge Dredd movie. Mm-hmm. And that was like, oh, that does make sense. It's just kind of damned from the start. But in this sense, to make it like a small, down and dirty action film with like just a actor, you know what I mean? Like it's nowhere near a star. Yeah, that's the way to do it. And you're right. It does become a symbol of the system. That's a great way. That's a great way of saying it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't get too big in your fucking ego right now, by the way. You know, it'll get...
This is great.
Yeah, are you just going to replay this on ad nauseum, like on your headphones in the dark?
I'm like sitting on a throne right now.
Oh, don't... I'll bring you down. Be ready. But no, I'm with you. I'm with you for sure.
Yeah. So yeah, like that's the thing. Like, yes, it doesn't exactly look like the comic world, but ultimately it feels more like a Judge Dredd movie.
Yeah.
And then we mentioned Cadet Anderson being like the main character, so I guess we should say a little bit about her as well.
I was just gonna say I don't really know. Like, I mean, we joked about like I have posters of Olivia Thirlby. I don't know anything that she's been in. I only know her from
Juno
this
is like the.
Oh, is that what it is?
She was Juno's friend in that movie, and I'm pretty sure that's all I'd seen her in up to this point. Yeah.
But I remember seeing this film for the first time, being like apprehensive when all of a sudden it was like, oh, okay, he's getting the rookie, and it's gonna be one of these, and Dredd is a strong character. At the start, right? So when you see this kind of like the amateur rookie girl, we'll see. Oh, I see what you're doing, movie. I see what you're doing. But boy, does she live up to what everything is going on in the film. Like, she is.
Yeah, because there's the fear, right, that she could be another, like. What you're saying? There's the fear that she could be the Rob Schneider of this film, right?
Yes.
Like, oh, Dredd doesn't need a sidekick.
Yes.
But the thing is, like, by the end of this film, she's not a sidekick.
Or even like an Ariadne from Inception. Don't get me wrong, I like that character in Inception. I think she's extremely necessary. But I do kind of understand when she's only there to explain the world to you.
Yeah.
And again, I like that character, and she's necessary. But in this one, Anderson, it feels like she's so part of the movie. Like we said, she absolutely is the main character here, and she sells it so well. She's immediate charisma. And again, a great foil for Dredd, even so much as like she doesn't have a helmet on the entire film, which I think it's fun that Dredd actually speaks to that.
I take it this is your first time in non-sim combat.
Yes, sir.
I'm wondering when you'd remember you left your helmet behind.
Sir, a helmet can interfere with my psychic abilities.
I think a bullet might interfere with them more.
Yeah, so as you heard in that clip, the idea of Judge Anderson, or I guess I should say Cadet Anderson at this point, for those who don't know, this is another very big character from the comics. And this is the kind of the thing that happens, right? Whenever you make a new film of a character, you try to pick like the stuff that wasn't in the last movie, right? So because they had already used Judge Hershey, they were probably looking at this and saying, well, who's the other big kind of secondary character in the Judge Dredd universe we can bring in? And they picked Anderson, who I actually would argue is the bigger of the two. So that kind of worked as a bonus to them that the other film hadn't used Anderson yet. But Cassandra Anderson is a different kind of judge in that she is psychic. She is, in the comics, she is part of what is called the Psi Division in the judge world. And it's just exactly what it sounds like. She gained her psychic abilities because of the radioactive fallout that exists outside of Mega City 1's borders. So she kind of grew up living close to that wall. And the fallout killed her parents, but gave her psychic abilities. And there's some like, we talked about the satires not here in this film, but there are like little like bits of dialogue peppered in throughout that kind of tell us a lot about this world and kind of do work in that satire or peek into this universe. And one of them was when they mentioned that, just like every other orphan, she was given a judge aptitude test. So I like that idea that in this world, if you're an orphan, they just try to make you a judge.
Right.
And in her aptitude test, she failed, right? She didn't quite pass the test, but they're willing to make an exception and still give her a try at it because of her psychic abilities. As they say, she's got the best psychic abilities they've seen yet. And in this film, in the timeline of this film, the psi division is not a thing. She is actually basically an experiment to see, is this something we want to try and do, to have, a psychic be a part of our ranks. Right. And what's interesting is how they play Judge Dredd's reaction to that, because he kind of comes across as prejudice when he's introduced to her. Not only is he, first of all, he just doesn't want to do anything with her because she failed the test. And to him, he does not see things in black and white. It's all, the letter of the law. But he also is it seems like he's kind of bothered by her being a mutant, as he puts it. And I liked that too, is just, again, setting up like this slight bit of character growth he'll have.
And I like how it drops seeds of the world building. It's not flashy and in your face, like I said before. It's little lines like that. It's little soupçon of world development, and it really adds. It's just such a tight script. Like, I know it's so well put together. I don't want, like you said, you don't want to be hyperbolic and stuff. And like I know I'm just in the two of us. You know how I talk, and I think our listeners know me by this point too. Is like I do get a little extra, and I am just an extra person in general. But man, is this movie it just fucking works. Dude,
I'm not, like I agree. Like, I was thinking again watching this. This comes to the Alex Garland of it, obviously since this film, we've learned even more about like what a genius Alex Garland 100%. Is. But it is so apparent in this film, and I agree. Like, it's very easy to look at this film and say, like, oh, it's just another Judge Dredd movie. Oh, it's a simplistic like, first day on the job kind of movie. Oh, it's just an action film about them working their way up the levels of this building. But this film is actually pretty. Like, again, I know it sounds silly to use the word genius, but on like a screenplay level, there is a lot of like little great details like that. And again, just going back to the same scene, the scene where he first meets where he meets Cassandra Anderson, and she's kind of behind, it's kind of like an interrogation room. They have her in a different room. She can't see Dredd, but the Chief Justice asks her, like, to test her psychic abilities. She says, "Tell me about the man who's standing next to me." And I think that part is brilliant, where she says, like, "Well, what do you sense about him?" And she says, "I sense, anger and control, but there's something else, something behind the control, something." And then the Chief Justice cuts her off. Yeah. And we never come back to that. That's never addressed again. It's not like in any other movie, I feel like they would come back to that and be like, what was the thing that she was sensing? What was like the behind the control?
Yeah, they're walking out at the end, and Dredd looks and is like, "By the way, what were you going to say about me?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like this movie trusts its audience to just be like, "Yeah, no, you get it, right? What are we telling you about Dredd? Like, what does that insinuate about him? That there's something deeper beneath that, because like I said, we can't see his face. He's just a symbol to us, but she's sensing something about him. And it allows you to kind of like put the pieces together and like, oh, what does that mean? And I have my own ideas on that, of what she was sensing. If I ever met Alex Garland, I'd like to talk to him about it, but I just love that it's not answered in the film.
Yep. And for people that aren't familiar with Alex Garland, like we mentioned, he was a big writer for Sunshine and 28 Weeks Later and that before this. But after this, he directed Ex Machina. And that movie is a masterpiece. Again, on a script level, on an everything level, that film is just brilliant. And I know there's listeners out there that have seen that. They know that Alex Garland wrote Dredd and potentially, which we'll talk about, probably directed it. But just in general, if you loved Ex Machina, well, guess what? And you've never seen Dredd, put it on, because you get the beginnings of this guy's career.
Well, and then after Ex Machina, he goes on to do Annihilation, which was a movie that was not expected. Like, a lot of people didn't think it would work because he was adapting a very hard novel to adapt by Jeff Vandermeer. And that was a critical success, and I think a very strong film. This year he was the writer and director behind the Hulu miniseries Devs, which I unfortunately have not watched yet, but I heard nothing but good things.
Yeah, I saw that, and you'll love it.
Okay, yeah. So Alex Garland is he's one of the good ones out there, fighting the good fight for smart, intelligent sci-fi.
So we've kind of talked about our two main characters. I want to really now talk to the other of the trio. We have our two protagonists. Obviously, you got to have a fucking badass antagonist for them to go up against. And who do they hire? They get Lena Headey. Or Headey, whatever you say. But again, from Game of Thrones fame, Queen Cersei herself. Now, I hate saying the word love all the time, but I genuinely love her. I was a big fan of the Sarah Connor Chronicles. That was actually my first introduction, other than 300. I know she plays the Queen in 300. It's Queen Gorgo, I think. In 300, I love that movie. Unfortunately, Zack Snyder has taken a big cliff dive, but doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. But Lena Headey to me was always Sarah Connor in that show, which is a very underrated show. Never got its due. I actually saw her at a Comic-Con, a local Comic-Con, and I got a picture with her and Peter Dinklage. And I remember like telling her, it was like, hey, like I just love the Sarah Connor Chronicles. And she seemed a little taken back that like, oh, really? You remember that show? And I was like, oh yeah, I fucking love that show.
Yeah, I was not a fan of that show, but I will say I really liked her in it.
Yeah,
The two elements I thought were great in it was like she was awesome, and then of course Summer Glau was great. Like
yes,
as
exactly.
the Terminator, and like, but yeah, I remember watching that and just thinking like, even though I couldn't really get into it, and I could never finish it.
Sure.
I definitely watched it and thought like they couldn't have picked a better actress to take this baton from Linda Hamilton. Right?
100%.
Like she was just like it was that kind of like, I don't want to put it in the same level as like Mads Mikkelsen in Hannibal, but it was that thing where you're like, I'm not sure someone else can play that character. And in fact, since we've seen someone else do it far worse, but, someone else from Game of Thrones actually, But yeah, she like was perfect. She just like she nailed it. And then like you, I also knew him from 300 and the Brothers Grimm. So
right, yeah. But I want to say like she's such a brave actress, and that's what I like about her the most. When she comes on screen, she doesn't like she's gorgeous, but she's willing to take so many chances that go against that. I don't want to say typecast, but she could easily just be a leading lady, beautiful character all the time, gorgeous, you know what I mean? But she's willing to do the walk of shame in Game of Thrones. She's willing to get spit on in that scene. She's willing to look terrible, get shaved, all this other stuff. And in this film, she completely commits to the role of Mama.
Yep.
The head of the clan, that's the Mama clan, well, it's her clan, I guess. The head of this building, all of these gangs were in these buildings, as we've said before. But there's these big towers, these big structures that people live in, mega blocks that people live in for their entire lives, most likely. But basically, in this one, in the peach trees. In years prior, there was like every level had like a different gang or whatever. But then Mama was this prostitute, this drug addict, and she kept getting taken advantage of and assaulted and everything. And then she decides, fuck it, I'm taking over. And she takes out all of the gangs, and she's the leader of the entire Peach Trees mega block. And she commits to the look. She has this huge scar on her face. Her teeth look like shit. Her hair looks terrible. She looks horrible. Like she's seen some shit. And that's what I love about Lena Headey. She doesn't care about what she looks like on screen as long as the material is great. And she is fantastic. Just her lines, the way she says things, she's very calm, cool, and collected. She has this threat towards Dredd when they're in the when they actually come into the mega block.
This is Mama. Somewhere in this block are two judges. I want him dead. Until I get what I want, the block is locked down. All clan, every level. Want the judges down.
Everyone else clear the corridors and stay the fuck out of our way until the shooting stops.
If I hear of anyone helping the judges, I will kill them and the next generation of their family. As for the judges,
You better move.
sit tight or run.
Makes no difference, you're mine.
And so you hear that, and that just like perfectly encapsulates her character. She's calm. She's authoritative. She doesn't give a fuck about these judges that are in her mega block at this point. She's gonna take them out. And it's just such authority. It's so she's so good. She's so good.
Yeah, this couldn't be any more different than like Rico and Judge Dredd.
Yes.
Right? And I enjoyed that performance for like the camp level of it, but she is like such a better villain. And like you said, you want to find this villain who feels like a real threat to Dredd. And obviously she's not going to be a physical threat to him. And in fact, they don't even they don't share any screen time together until the end. So it's like, how do you make a villain that seems threatening, even though she's not going to be presented as a physical threat or like a constant kind of someone that he's fighting? And it's exactly what he said, is that you just buy this character as someone who's like completely in control of this place. And a lot of that speaks to just her performance. I think she's very scary in this film.
Oh, yes.
Like you do watch it and feel like, wow, I am intimidated by her, and I would definitely just fall into line behind her if I was in this. Big
time.
I will say something earlier where you said that she looks like shit in this film. I don't care how big of a scar you put on her face. Lena Headey still is like super hot in this movie.
Yeah, you know what I mean, though.
Until she, I was just like, I remember seeing like the scar. I'm like, wow, she looks really good with that scar. And then she opens her mouth and has those cracked teeth, and you're like, oh no, well there's the But as long as when the cracked teeth are hidden, she still looks great.
Yeah, for sure.
But she is fantastic in this. The character was actually written to be like a very scarred and obese older woman.
Yeah.
And Lena Headey was the one who like actually went to like Peter Travis and Alex Garland and kind of convinced them, like, what if we just played it as this instead, And I'm glad they listened to her, because amazing villain. She
has this great quote about Mama, the character. I think of Mama like an old great white shark who's just waiting for someone bigger and stronger to show up and kill her. She's ready for it. In fact, she can't wait for it to happen. She's an addict, so she's dead. She's dead in that way. But that last knock just hasn't come.
Yeah, and that's
awesome.
And she's dead on too, and that actually comes across in her performance, where it's like not like suicidal necessarily.
No,
but just like
she's ready for her comeuppance.
And right, like what we said, for Dredd, this is just like another day in his life. It feels like the same way for Mama. Like,
yes.
Bring her a situation, she'll just deal with it, and she's not going to freak out about anything. Like, she never, you never see her get too worked up or nervous about what's happening in this. She always has a plan. It's great. I don't have anything more to say there.
No, that's fine. we're just so excited about this movie, guys. If you didn't watch it or rewatch it before this episode, please do after. I hope we get you hyped up to watch it, because it deserves it. It just does. I wanted to jump into just kind of production design. Is that cool? Just like the look of stuff. I like the look of the 95 Judge Dredd. I do like. I like. Remember I said in that one. I mentioned I like classic Hollywood. There's this fun aspect of looking at stuff that is fake, and you're watching a movie, and it's just charming. In this movie, again, the gritty realism's there, and the budget is so small that they have to get creative. And I love when filmmakers are like backed up against a wall, and they're like, fuck, we gotta get creative. And there's something about the colors, the lighting, the obvious usage of the exact same corridor. But it works because just they change the lighting a little bit. Or they throw some green smoke down, and like it just looks so good. It's a movie that is stylish, but never style over substance. You know what I mean? You're never like I mentioned Zack Snyder before. Zack Snyder's gone a little weird in the way that everything he makes is just style over substance. He's obviously a brilliant visionary person, but he never gets past that. There's something about this film, Dredd, and Alex Garland's look, his visual style. That you can kind of tell that it's his, especially to go to his later work. It just, I hate. Okay, I'm about to say something super cringe, but I hate when people say like, oh, like the house is a character, or like like this inanimate object is the character of the piece. Like I kind of hate that, but in this sense, there is a visual language to this that feels like Peach Trees is a genuine character in the film. Would you agree?
Well, and I don't think to the credit of the film again is it's not just visual. It's also it is also like the characters themselves.
Yeah.
When we walk into Peach Trees, we get that conversation between Dredd and Anderson where he kind of is like dismissing the people who live in mega blocks like this. And she says, like, I grew up in a mega block like this. I know there are good people here, So we're actually told a lot about like what this world is too, right? That it's not just this like haven for criminals. It's a place where families live, and it's a place where not only families but poor families who can't get anything better than this, And there's so you actually have a lot of sympathy for the people here, especially as the film goes on and terrible things start happening to them, just because they're caught in the middle of this like battle now between Mama and her clan and the judges. So yeah, I actually think this is an amazing setting, and this kind of speaks to this too. When this film came out, I don't know if you were very conscious of this, Chris, but there was a lot of comparisons to the works of John Carpenter with this film.
Okay.
It was a lot of like, oh, this is like a modern John Carpenter movie. And I think obviously the film people were really kind of connecting it to, where it was Assault on Precinct 13, which is, a very similar kind of, not necessarily similar exactly story, not the same story exactly, but a similar kind of stuck in one location under siege kind of, thing. And then a little bit of the satire. But also I think it was, and you mentioned this, is that ability to take a smaller budget and just do these little tricks and things to really stretch that budget and make it bigger. And as you said, like, yes, when you watch a film, it's kind of obvious that we're probably seeing the same hallway over and over again. But as you said, just lighting changes, different camera angles. I really feel like they're in this like gigantic building, even though I know they're not, and like, and yeah, the looks of it when the camera goes straight up and shows you how high that ceiling looks, or when we see people fall from the top level to the bottom, like how effective that is. Yeah, it's a great location, and well, I guess we should just say, like, let's just talk about the simplicity of the storytelling a little bit.
Yeah, I was just about to say that.
Yeah. So I mentioned earlier, like, another film that this is often compared to, which came out around the same time, that is, of course, The Raid, the fantastic Gareth Evans martial arts extravaganza.
It's actually The Raid: Redemption.
Well, it is in North America, yes. I think I'm pretty sure it was just The Raid initially, and it's in Indonesia. But The Raid Redemption, whatever you want to call it, the first Raid film, When they came out around the same time, you probably remember that there was a lot of talk like, ooh, which one ripped off the other? And it turned out that neither did. Like, it was just a coincidence, right? Both these films were in production at the same time. But what they obviously the similarity is just this story of, like, law enforcement in a multi-leveled building having to fight their way either up or down the levels and just facing new challenges in each level. Very video game-ish, right? What do you feel like? What do you think of that as just a storytelling approach for Dredd?
I think it keeps in line with his character, as like he is very direct. So if you have a direct plot, something simple and to the point, well, that's Dredd. He doesn't really beat around the bush. He's not really. I mean, he's a little quippy at some points, which is kind of fun. There's some great lines in this.
Sir, he's thinking about making a move for your gun.
Yeah.
He just changed his mind.
Yep.
But he's to the point. And so he's got to get from point A to point B and by the book as he sees fit. So it kind of makes sense that, he's the criminal's at the top. We got to get to the top. We got to get the criminal. We got to deal with him. And that's the movie.
Yeah, and I think it even like on a screenwriting level too, it works perfectly for the fact that, as we said, if you look at this as a film about Anderson, really, and Anderson's journey, and this being her first day on the job, she's like, and it's not even her first day on the job, it's her test, it's her, to see if she will become a judge. And then the fact that they get to kind of, go through these different levels, and each new location, each new situation, Dredd is either giving her a different test or telling her something more about the world. Yep. So it actually does allow, exposition dumps in a way that feels natural. And you get to see, and this also her progress as a character to that level of like saying like what this film does that other films might not. I remember seeing this for the first time and just being kind of taken aback by the sequence you get to where Dredd tells her to perform an execution on the spot. And just thinking about how in like the Stallone version or like 9 out of 10 Hollywood versions, she would find a way out of that. Right, like the character probably would not actually do it, and not only does this film have Anderson, kill the guy, give him the on-spot death penalty, but they have her meet the man's widow later.
Yeah,
and
unbeknown to the widow,
but she, because she's psychic, she realizes it.
Yeah,
and that's like a moment where you're talking about like how good Olivia Thirlby is in this. Like that's one of the moments. I mean, she's great in the whole thing, but just seeing that play across her face. And seeing her wrestle with like, does she tell her? And then realizing she shouldn't tell her. And just the fact that this movie like commits to this, like how harsh and ugly this world of the judges is. And doesn't apologize for it. Again, like this isn't a movie like, that's the thing about the the Stallone Judge Dredd film, by doing that story and putting Judge Dredd on that path and having it get to a place where at the end he realizes that maybe the system is kind of broke, and then he's like kind of smiling and laughing at the end. That movie felt like it felt like it had to apologize for the judges. This movie just does the thing the comics does and just commits to saying, hey, these are your main characters. You can think what they do is right or wrong, but we're just presenting it as is.
Yep.
And we're even going to watch the hero of the film, the most sympathetic character. We are going to watch her become that judge.
Yeah.
Now, granted, we'll say a little bit about her character growth and how she still represents maybe a better direction for the judges. But she buys into it enough that she is willing to kill when she has to.
And it sits with her like throughout the whole movie. She knows things are necessary, but she's definitely human. She still has that humanity that Dredd obviously doesn't. To a point. There actually is a scene that I loved with two kids that confront Dredd and Anderson. And in the Stallone one, I mean, he was killing other judges that didn't need to be killed. But in this one, Dredd like reads the situation, realizes the kids are just misinformed or just being kids and thinking that they're doing the right thing. But he reads the situation, and what does he do? He stuns them.
Yep.
He doesn't blow their fucking heads off.
Even though it's basically what he told them he was going to do. Because he says to them, like,
Yes.
Body bags or Juve cubes makes no difference to me. But then, yes, you notice that he stuns them.
Yeah. So he has so that goes back to we don't see growth much in Dredd, but there's little bit of humanity behind that helmet still. There's a little bit.
Exactly. We see that he is harsh but fair.
Yes.
Another great example is when they're walking into peach trees and they pass the homeless individual who, first of all, you're talking about how there's like not as much satire in this film, but when it's there's some great satire.
For sure.
And I love his sign, which says like homeless junkie will debase self for credits.
Yeah.
That makes me laugh every time. But they have that moment too where Dredd asks Anderson to kind of like judge him in the moment, and she says, "Well, we have we're responding to a murder inside the tower. We should prioritize that." And Dredd says like agreed, and then even tells the guy, "Just don't be here when we come back."
Yeah.
So the fact that he gives him that out, right? And then when they come back later, the guy's still there, and then Dredd, is going to arrest him. Something happens where it does not, but we see that he did give that guy a chance, and then as you said, he stuns the kid. So yes, this is a version of Dredd that is still fair at least.
And again, Anderson is. It's almost like again she is there to remind people again that there is something there. There is a humanity left. And I love when after this incredible minigun scene, they blow it's amazing. The minigun scene is top notch when I'm talking about visuals and lighting and stuff. It's just beautiful. It's just so well done. But they blow out this wall, and Dredd and Anderson kind of just they're hiding outside the wall now at like an actual like little mini skate park that is built on the outside of peach trees. And there's this great, again, you talk about Olivia Thirlby's acting. A lot of it's in the face. She stops, she looks out, she looks at all the other mega blocks, and what she's thinking is, fuck, they're all like this, isn't it? Like, this is what I gotta look forward to. And she's like, oh my God, like, she's reeling with herself, with everything that's happening, and then realize, man, it's never gonna end. This is gonna be my life. It's a really great turning point where there's no dialogue. There's nothing at all. And it just fucking sells it. And, no, she's just great. We don't say she's great.
Yeah, watching this, I'm shocked that coming out of this that Olivia Thirlby wasn't like snatched up by like the MCU or something, or like we talk about Karl Urban, but I can't believe she's not a bigger star just based off her performance in this film.
She's so good. So one scene we got to talk about the interrogation scene. So as we said, she's like a psychic judge to be, but she's got psychic abilities. Well, they have a what's the guy? I don't know his name. I can't remember his name.
Wood Harris is the actor.
Wood Harris. Yeah. So he's kind of for half the movie.
People know him as Avon Barksdale on The Wire.
Yes. Or as I just watched for the first time ever, Remember the Titans.
Yeah.
I saw it 20 years late, and guess what? It's pretty good. So yeah, he's handcuffed for most of the movie, and there's this moment where Anderson needs to interrogate him for a passcode of something. And they have this moment, or they have this scene. It's just incredible.
What are you up to, bitch?
Welcome to the inside of your head. It's kind of empty in here.
I don't know what kind of mutant shit this is, but if my hands weren't cuffed...
You aren't cuffed, if you don't want to be.
My head. Do what I like.
Sure. Thinking about hurting me doesn't actually hurt me.
Yeah, points to you. Except, there is that thing
What thing was that?
that I know how to freak you the fuck out. See, if you're talking about my fucked up head versus your fucked up head, your fucked up head is gonna lose. Figured that would shut you up.
And I can play mind games too. We haven't even started. Got it.
It shows the her superpower, I guess, in a really just fun, clever, powerful way. I was reminded of this is how probably this was better than the way that Kylo Ren does it. You know, with Rey and Poe. You know, like it was. I like that scene in The Force Awakens where Kylo Ren's like having the mental battle, but this one kind of visualizes it in this really trippy, fun way, and it's just a really cool scene that I was a big fan of.
Yeah, and then again to talk about like these little details that you might not even notice on first watch, and things that come to like kind of revisiting it and realizing like how smart the screenplay is in that like mental battle where she's putting images into his head. One of the things she shows him is him picking up her gun and shooting her with it, like giving him the idea of like that's how you could like get the one up on me. And then later he tries that, and we've learned that as we know, like the Judge's guns cannot be used by anyone else. And when he tries to use the gun, it obviously backfires on him. And the idea, like you realize like, oh, she kind of implanted that idea in his head, like during like the psychic battle. So even just something that's like small, like a small detail like that, and how clever it is.
That's amazing. I've never put that together.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's so cool. Oh man, incepting the idea into him, very cool, very cool. Love it.
Yeah, and that whole like this character growth of Anderson. I'm glad we're talking about it because I want to come back to something we mentioned earlier, and that is this overall question that has, I don't want to say plagued the film, but oftentimes one of the critiques you'll see of this film is that it didn't need to be a Judge Dredd movie.
Right.
So by saying like, oh, it's just this, it's like, because I say it's like The Raid. It's just hero cops going through a building full of criminals. The satire is not as heavy in this one as it is in the Stallone film or as in the comics. There are little bits of it. We get, like I said, we get the homeless sign, which is kind of funny. There's a moment, we do have when he go after the car chase at the beginning, and he is going into a building where a perp has shot up a bunch of people, and he calls for both ambulances and also to pick up bodies for recyc.
Right.
And then we see like the machine later that's just like picking up all the dead bodies and then like sweeping the blood up, and it says like, don't worry, citizens, the mall will reopen in 30 minutes. So those little bits of like Dredd's world bleed through, but not in a heavy way. So people will say like, well, I don't know if this needs to be a Dredd film because it doesn't feel like it's telling us much about Dredd's world. And I actually will defend that or like argue against that a little bit. I think the reason that this does really work as a Judge Dredd story is because of the character arc of Anderson. Mm-hmm. And in particular, how we see, as you said, you mentioned that brilliant moment, which I also love, with her looking out into the city and realizing what have I got myself into.
Yeah.
But the whole movie is kind of watching her to see, is she, like, as I mentioned this earlier, is she going to become Judge Dredd? Or is she going to become a judge, but in a way that allows her to retain her humanity and maybe even start to change the system a little bit? Mm-hmm. And that's the story that's ultimately being told here. And the fact that Dredd, who at the beginning of the film says she's a mutant, she's a fail, she shouldn't even, he only agrees to take her on this because the Chief Justice tells him to, and Dredd's not going to turn down an order. But you realize that from the beginning, he does not think she's got what it takes to be a judge.
Right.
And at the end, he accepts her, and you even see, as much as you can with a character like Dredd, that little bit of character growth in him is that he starts to see her value as a judge. And the fact that he actually gives her the pass at the end kind of tells you that if she can break through even just that much into someone like Dredd, then she might be the spark that this system needs to start becoming like, a better system. And in fact, she's probably the only person in this world that actually should be a judge. Yeah. Because the fact that she's psychic means she actually can make the actual calls that should be made about these people, as we see with how she reacts to. We haven't even mentioned that Donald Gleason is in this.
Oh, right.
As the computer expert for the Mama clan, who has had his eyes popped out by Mama and replaced with kind of robotic eyes. He's, because he is working for Mama the whole time, Dredd just sees him as a criminal. But because she's psychic, she's able to realize he's a victim and that he's being forced to do this. And so you realize, like, oh, actually, she's the beginning of a better new kind of judge. And that's why I do think this does need to be a Judge Dredd story. Or at least I don't know if it needs to be, but it works really well as one.
You're so right. And on top of all that, we get these amazing slow-mo scenes. So I alluded to them in the beginning, to making one of my favorite 3D of any movie I've ever seen. But there's this drug that the Mama clan is producing and distributing throughout Peach Trees and probably throughout Mega City 1. But it's this drug that you take, and it immediately slows down your perception of time to like thousands and thousands less of a second. Okay, so it's just this brilliant hallucinogen effect that you just immediately you get it, you buy it. You're like, man, you almost think, oh, that'd be kind of fun actually, until you see that Mama takes people, skins them alive, which you don't see that they were skinned, but you see the after effect, them tossed out of a window, but high on slow-mo. So you now as the viewer are thinking, you have all the pieces of the context, right? And you're like, man, they were just skinned alive, probably on slow-mo, and now they're being fed more slow-mo, and they're being tossed out of a kilometer high building. Mm-hmm. So cool. And if that's horrifying, first of all, I know I'm saying so cool, but it's absolutely horrifying when you put those pieces together, that these people fell from a kilometer at thousands of a second, and just knowing they're going to hit the ground and what they're dealing with and everything. It's fantastic. But the actual sequence of everything is like this crazy cool like filter effect. This shine to it. There's actually this, I don't know if it's been confirmed, but I did read that the sound that they use for it is like a Justin Bieber song that's slowed down to like 8,000 or something. Is that real?
I want to talk about this. Okay, yes, it is real. Because this is something I was actually aware of going into the film, because what they're talking about I actually had on my iPod. Or still do have, because I still have an iPod. Yeah. So,
well, you are 100 years old.
You know what? To this day, I will defend the iPod Classic.
My God.
It really bothers me that Apple kind of phased that out. But anyways, around this time, I don't know who did this first or whatever, but people started to discover that if you took like kind of any pop song or anything and slowed it down by like 1,000% or 500%. It would take like what just normally sounds like a kind of a generic pop song and turn it into this kind of like beautiful ethereal soundscape. Kind of makes like anything sound like Sigur Rós or something, right?
Yep.
And somebody took the Justin Bieber song. I think it's called "You Believe" or "I Believe." I don't know. I'm not a. What are the Bieber fans called?
Bieber fever. What are you?
See, this is how little we know about Justin Bieber. We can't remember what the fan.
What are they?
No,
we have to figure this out before we move on. What are they? They're
Believers. It just
Believers. My man.
I'm not a believer, but I think the song is called "Believe," and it should be called "Believe." Anyways, somebody slowed it down 1,000%, and it's beautiful. It's like haunting and amazing. And I put that on my iPod. I would play it for people, and like. It's very long, obviously, and after a couple minutes, I'd be like, "What do you think this is?" And then you could tell them, "No, this is Justin Bieber," and nobody can believe it, right?
That's so cool.
Well, when they did like the temp, first cut for this film, the composer Paul Leonard Morgan, he synced those sequences to that soundscape, the Justin Bieber song "Slow Down." And everybody ended up liking it so much that I think now I've heard conflicting things on this. I've heard that they tried to actually get the rights to the Bieber song and couldn't.
Yeah.
And that he had to then like recreate it. I don't think I believe that. I think he just liked that sound enough that he figured out how to recreate it. And he essentially made a soundscape that sounds very much like that. But if you do go on YouTube and like listen to the Justin Bieber song "Slow Down," it does sound almost exactly like what he created for those moments. And yeah, it's beautiful. And as you said, also visually, how much they were like ramp up the colors in those sequences, especially for as a film that's so dark and gritty normally. How like amazingly bright the blood is amazing. When we're watching Dredd and Anderson just like mow these people down in the slow-mo, and like they're just, I know it sounds weird to say how like gorgeous and beautiful watching someone's jaw get shot off is.
Yeah.
But it is, because the colors are incredible, the sound is awesome, and yeah, these sequences kicked ass in 3D.
No, it was awesome. I'm glad you mentioned Paul Leonard Morgan. I was going to say earlier, but his pulsing industrial tech rock score is fucking sweet. It's been on
this is this is our score horror minute.
Yes. It is fantastic. It's just a great main theme that goes through. It's not really hummable, but it fits.
Yeah. No, I remember sometimes you have like, as a fellow score horror, you'll probably agree with me on this. Those moments where like if a score is awesome, when like the end credits hit and you just feel like your adrenaline kind of kicks back up, just sitting there in your seat in the theater, like yes, like just rocking out to the themes as it's playing over the end credits, and I'm like, you're like, I don't even want to get up and leave the theater right now. This is just too good, you know.
That's actually a huge reason, or a big part of how when I got into scores is just I love sitting through the credits. I've always loved, like, I know I've had so many friends and girlfriends in the past and this and that just want to like just get up and leave, and I'm like, nah. I gotta sit through this, and especially like you said, if it just hits you, you're like, oh yeah, like the again, we mentioned Dark Knight, but the end of Dark Knight, you know, like he goes off into the sunset, or into not the sunset, but goes off into the night, and it just cuts to black, and then just like the fucking Hans Zimmer score hits you in the chest. You're like, ay.
Another one for me is that I don't know what I would call it a theme, but that music that plays over the end credits of the last Matrix film.
Yes,
the first two used.
It's Navras, that's what it's called.
Yeah, the first two use the Rage songs that are also great, but that music at the end of the third film is great.
So sweet.
But I agree. Paul Leonard Morgan's score, and this is awesome, and it's also been one that I've like revisited and listened to a lot in the years since. Yeah.
Now, jumping just kind of like to the end of the film, I want to mention one thing because it does allude. It's to do with the slow-mo. Like you said before, Mama as a character is always planning for something, and she's never.
She's like the. By the way, Mama is like the good version of Cersei in the last season of Game of Thrones. Yes. Because Mama also is only ever really standing at windows and balconies, planning things. But see how when you know what you're doing, you can still make the character interesting and threatening, and not just boring.
Ruthless again.
Anyways,
you're so right. And in this movie, like she as you said, she's never bothered, she's never worried, she's ready to die if need be. And
she also gets the ending that Cersei deserved. So
oh my god, I know,
a satisfying one. Yeah.
Oh my god, probably. And I actually have this written down. It is one of my all-time, and I mean this not just because we're shooting for the show, it is one of my all-time favorite villain deaths. It is. It's stuck with me over these last 8 years. It is phenomenal because, again, okay, the script. Let's get back to it. I'm getting so excited. I mean, like, it's the setup and the payoff. Okay, we know how the slow-mo works. We've seen her torture her victims and toss them out a fucking balcony, and they have to fall to their deaths, okay? We've seen Mama, not be bothered by anything. She just accepts her fate or accepts what's going on, and she's always in control. At the end of this movie, Dredd gets a hold of her, gives her some slow-mo, so we all know how this is going to work out. Yeah. And then fucking tosses her out this window to her death. Okay, and the camera, weirdly, this kind of ends the same way as Judge Dredd does. Is Rico gets thrown off the fucking Statue of Liberty, and it's like, and kind of in slow-mo actually, and it's just terrible. But in this one, the camera stays with Mama almost the entire time falling down the 1 kilometer. That's 1,000 meters, Trev. I know you live in this imperialistic, weird wasteland that is the States.
I know. I was letting you get away with your stupid metric system. But go ahead.
But 1 kilometer is 2.2 miles. So think of it that way. So this camera stays with her the entire way down, and she's even having character, like she's even accepting her fate while she's falling. Like, it's just such this incredible foreshadowing and payoff.
Not only that, but I love the detail too of because she's falling in slow-mo, we watch her see what's happening in levels as she's flying by, and we see like the aftermath of previous action sequences playing out in those levels. Yeah.
It's incredible. I got goosebumps. It's incredible. It's so good. And then she fucking smacks the ground, but it does it in an angle that it's like an angle, like a wide shot, or kind of a horizon shot, just to lack of a better word, that she's falling straight down to the ground. But then it cuts to completely under her face, and her face hits the ground, and it's still in slow-mo. You see her skull crack, and it cuts away in the perfect spot that it's not too gross and gory at all. You just know. You just get it that she's going to become a bloody mess on the ground, but it doesn't show you, and it allows you to just accept how, like, man, what a fate. You know?
Chris, I'm going to tell you something right now that I think is going to, because this is another thing you might not have noticed, and it's going to blow your mind to the point where I think you might even, after we finish recording, you might get up, put your Blu-ray back in and watch this.
Okay.
This was pointed out to me. I did not ever notice this, but I was watching for it this time, and it's true. When she hits the ground, as you were just saying, and we get that amazing shot of like, the actual impact of her on the ground.
Yeah.
The blood spatter that forms is a red X, just as we see on the helmets of the judges.
Get the fuck out of here, really?
Yeah.
No shit. This movie's, guys, again, if you haven't rewatched Dredd or watched it at all, man, wow. That's cool. Those little details, man, throughout the entire movie, there's just so much to it. This gets to, like, why did it fail, right? But it gets maybe clumped into, like you said, a Raid ripoff. Or just another action movie where
or just another comic book movie.
Or just another comic book movie where people just go up the stairs and shoot a bunch of people, and it's a little gory and blah blah. Like, it gets pigeonholed into boring stuff in a weird way. You know what I mean? Like, but it deserves so much more. I have yet to meet somebody who's watched this movie that doesn't love it.
I agree with that. I've never met anyone who's seen it and didn't like it. That's for sure.
And again, not just didn't like it, didn't love it. I remember my brother never saw this in theaters, and I was like, man, like, we gotta finally watch. I showed it to him a couple years ago, and I went to his house and we watched it, and my brother was just blown away. He loved it. I got another buddy that didn't see it in theaters, and he even regretted it. Everybody that sees it seems to regret not watching it.
Yeah, when I just rewatched it for this show the other night, I watched it with a friend who had never seen it and actually didn't care at all about it, did not think it sounded interesting. And I was just like, well, we've been doing regular movie nights. And I was like, well, this is one I have to watch for my show.
Yeah.
And so she went into it and she was like, whatever. I think her attitude going in was, who cares? Mm-hmm. And when it was done, I said, what did you think? And she said, well, that movie was badass in every way.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Inhabitants of peach trees.
This is Judge Dredd.
Let him talk.
In case you people have forgotten, this block operates under the same rules as the rest of the city. Mama is not the law.
I am the law.
Mama is a common criminal. Guilty of murder. Guilty of the manufacture and distribution of the narcotic known as slow-mo. And as of now, under sentence of death. Any who obstruct me in carrying out my duty will be treated as an accessory to her crimes. You have been warned. And as for you, Mama, judgment time.
And I do really want to mention before we start getting into some other stuff about it. So after the amazing like climax with him and Mama, we get the wrap up, which has an incredible dialogue exchange that basically to me sums up the film and is ultimately like the thesis of the film from Dredd's perspective.
When I heard you called in a 1024, I thought I'd better check it out. Seeing as I forced the rookie on you. So what happened in there?
Drug bust.
Looked like you've been through it.
Perps were uncooperative.
And so that right there is just perfect because that just tells you everything you need to know about Dredd. And that what we just watched, this entire crazy action story with them having to fight off these multiple gangs and, having to work their way through this skyscraper and all this crap. Obviously the hardest day of Cassandra Anderson's life, but just another day for Dredd. The fact that he's just like that nonplussed by it. And that's why the whole just a day in the life of Dredd idea was so great because it's like, just look how Yep, he just was. That's just something that happened to him. You know, he's been there before. He knows he'll be through it again, and that's just how he views this world, right? Like it's just like that's my job. I did my job.
Yep.
Oh, great.
Now, after all of this, why the fuck didn't this work? What happened? I honestly still can't put my finger on it.
I don't think it was marketed well. I don't think it was marketed enough, first of all, and I don't think it was marketed well either. So, I mean, obviously, it was always going to be a smaller film, as we said. You know, it's coming from smaller production companies, a smaller budget, not really meant to be like a big blockbuster.
Yeah.
But so, first of all, the marketing's not really strong. But also remember when it comes out. I mean, it is released in September of 2012. You're coming off of a summer that had The Avengers.
Right.
Right? Was that also the summer of Dark Knight Rises?
Yes, it was.
Yeah. So, I mean, two huge comic book films, which took up a lot of the air in the room, you know. So it really was like a matter of bad timing. I think this is a film that maybe would have done a little better if it had come out before the summer or early in the summer, you know.
Right.
I think a fall release following two of the biggest comic book movies ever, based on a little character that, as I said, most of the audience only knew from a previous film, which nobody liked. Starring an actor who is not well known, but also some people might not even know he's starring in it because he can't. They don't sell his name. They don't show his face. You know, I'm not. Ultimately, unfortunately, I'm not surprised it didn't work. I am surprised it didn't pick up a little bit more word of mouth during its initial release.
Right.
That's what kind of shocks me, because I feel like as soon as it came out, the reviews were pretty good right away. And I was definitely bummed to see it fail so hard so fast, because by the second weekend, it was clear this was not going well. And I remember that second weekend, you were already seeing articles like, well, I guess we won't get any more of these.
Yeah.
And you ultimately felt that like that kind of instant, like kind of fan campaign to like, people, we got to either do this now or get the, when the DVD comes out, let's get this some additional attention. This is one of those films that's had a lot of like, petitions signed to get sequels, which never works. And I don't know why people still bother with that. Even to the point of like the 2000 AD in some of their comics actually were asking people to sign a petition. It's like, you guys, you got to give it up at some point.
Totally,
but, yeah. This is definitely to me one of the more frustrating ones, because Urban and Thirdly were both on record as saying they were down for doing more. Urban to this day talks about wanting to do more. I mean, we'll talk about that in a moment about the potential future of this as a property. But we should talk about the controversy of this film that now exists, because this is a more recent development in the world of this film and of Dredd. This is something that has become more known to people in the last couple of years. So earlier I was going to kind of pause you and say maybe you were throwing Pete Travis under the bus a little bit, because you were talking about the amazing visuals of Alex Garland. This is where we get into like a debate, right? Because now this film is ostensibly directed by Pete Travis. But in the last couple of years, Karl Urban did an interview where he said that as far as he's concerned, this movie is actually directed by Alex Garland, and he considers this to be Alex Garland's first directorial effort. Do you want to explain to our listeners why that might be?
Yeah, so, I mean, a lot of the time when a writer, I guess, writes a movie, they are sometimes on set, they're sometimes involved in some ways. In this aspect, Alex Garland was in talks with John Wagner almost constantly when he was writing the script. The creator of Judge Dredd, and always beefing up the script there. But also he was like a constant presence on set.
Yep.
It sounds like Alex Garland was on set every day. So much so that actually Karl Urban always turned to him for direction. He didn't really go to Pete Travis. He didn't, not to work on the performance, not to work on nothing. He was always going to Alex Garland, like, what do you think? What do you think? What do I do? Let's do this. So it really felt like a collaboration between actor and writer versus actor and director. Now, on top of that, the film is shot, okay? So, again, who knows? Let's give credit. Who knows what their credit truly lies with the visuals in that sense. Sometimes I lean towards Garland just because of his later work, but a case could be made that, well, it's because he learned it on this film. You know what I mean? From somebody else.
Yeah.
But
I'll actually throw in, before you say the second part of that, I'll throw in my opinion on that.
Yep.
Because I do think what's happened recently is I feel kind of bad for Pete Travis in a way where I feel like he's really been kind of like pushed to the side now in the narrative of this film. And I will say that based on what you just said, which I've read as well, I kind of get the sense that because this was a 3D film, And because they had to work with that technology, and like we all know that makes like filming a movie that much harder.
Yeah,
it's like having to figure out how to like make those cameras like work and how to make the shots set up the right way and everything. I have a feeling that Travis was actually just primarily concerned with the visuals of it all and everything. And then, as you said, then the actors actually kind of went to Garland.
Right.
And to me, that ultimately sounds like not too dissimilar from the way the Coen brothers direct, where one is kind of the visualist and the other one works with the actors.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it sounds like maybe that's what happened on set, to where I'll actually give Travis some credit and say, like, I think he might have been handling the actual like shot setup and everything. And then Garland, who was more versed in the characters, was talking to the actors about here's how you should kind of perform this. But there's a second aspect of that, which you can go into now.
That's a good point. But then it goes on to the post-production phase of the film.
Mm-hmm.
So there's again, we don't know exactly who was behind the camera at the points in time, but we definitely know who was in the editing room. And there was somebody who was not, and it was Pete Travis. It sounds like the production company. There's a couple of production companies that were involved in this. But,
I think Rebellion is the main one.
Okay, Rebellion actually pushed him out of the editing room because they were not happy with the visuals and they weren't happy with the shots.
Sorry, DNA Films.
DNA, okay.
Yeah,
but they weren't happy with things, so they actually took him off. And again, when it comes to stories like this, we don't know exactly what was said, who is this, who is that, who who exactly did push who and who out, but just. The fact is, Pete Travis was not involved in the editing process. Mm-hmm. Who was involved was Alex Garland.
Yep.
So it sounds like he was ostensibly the editor of the film, putting it together, right? Not with the editor. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it went so far as to they had to release a joint statement actually together because, again, Garland was not listed as the director of the film, but the controversy got so bad that they had to actually acknowledge this. So they released, Travis and Garland released a joint statement in October of 2011 after this article actually came out from the LA Times talking about, hey, this movie's coming out next year and there's a lot of shit going on for its 2012 release. So here's the statement. During all stages of the filmmaking, Dredd has been a collaboration between a number of dedicated creative parties. From the outset, we decided on an unorthodox collaboration to make the film. This situation has been misinterpreted. To set the record straight, Pete was not fired and remains a central part of the collaboration, and Alex is not seeking a co-director credit. We are all extremely proud of the film we have made and respectfully suggest that it is judged on viewing when it's released next year.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely sounds like...
Studio
getting involved, and kind of trying to smooth the situation over. But it is interesting that they say, like, Pete Travis remains, an important collaborator, that they don't just say he remains the director, right? So I feel like even there you're getting a little bit of a thing. And ultimately, you've heard this before, Chris, that they always say a film is made 3 times, right? Yeah. It's made in the writing, in the shooting, and then the editing. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, we know Garland was the more important figure in 2 of those 3.
Yes.
And not to take anything away from Pete Travis, but, from what if same thing, like I've heard, like his initial cut or whatever was not pleasing anybody, and Garland had to come in and kind of rework the film and editing. He was on set enough to where he was probably still somewhat involved in some of those decisions, and he was the writer. I can see why it's easy to look at this film, and as you said, also just compared to what comes after, you can see like the seeds of what we know of Garland now in this film, and then Pete Travis. Again, I don't know if I look at this and go, this is clearly the vantage point guy, So
totally. And it's also, it speaks to later on too, because Alex Garland has been asked now, obviously a bunch of times about a sequel, and if there was going to be something made, and there's been conversations throughout all the years about something, and he flat out said no. And actually his quote is, it was a pretty crude experience for a bunch of reasons. At the end of it, I didn't want to go back. I love Dredd, by which I mean I love the character, but I'm not in any hurry to do that again.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's also telling. That's telling, right?
And that's the shame of it, because you look at this and you go like, wow, like that's, if they make more of these, Garland is exactly who I want in charge, because man, did he get it. But the situation just turned out to be such a nightmare for him that he sounds pretty burnt out on it. Yeah. Now, I will say, we mentioned earlier about, the talk of this, does this have any future? And you just mentioned that since 2012, there's been a very big kind of fan effort to get a sequel made. John Wagner, the creator of Dredd, unlike the Stallone film, he was very happy about this one. He was a more involved collaborator on this. He was kind of on as a can't remember what his like title was on this, but a consultant, right? Creative consultant.
He's also immediately credited as the credits roll, which was awesome.
I thought that was interesting. Yeah, the very first credit is not directed by Pete Travis or starring Karl Urban. The very first credit is Judge Dredd, created by John Wagner and Carlos Esquera. Yeah, so that was really cool.
Love that.
But yeah, he was very happy with this, and he's also talked about how he'd like to see more. Urban and Thirdly have said they want to do more. The ship has sailed, I think, at this point.
I think so too.
At the moment, though, Rebellion Entertainment, which is the media wing of 2000 AD, the publishing company in charge of Dredd, they have been working for the last couple of years on a TV show called Mega City 1, which would be, to a certain degree, a Judge Dredd show, just based on that title. They haven't talked too much. I haven't heard too much about what the show would be. Based on just based on the title and what my assumption would be was that Judge Dredd wouldn't necessarily have to be in every episode. It could be different stories of things that happen in Mega City 1. But they have said that Judge Dredd would be involved.
Yeah.
Karl Urban is not signed on to it by any degree, but he's been asked multiple times about it, and he's always said that he's looking forward to the project. He does believe it'll happen, and he says he's like, obviously, I hope to be involved.
Yeah.
I think they are crazy if they have Judge Dredd in that show and they don't bring Urban back.
Yeah.
Like, that to me would just be like mind-boggling, because you have an actor who everybody loved him in that role. The fans of the character see him as that part now. He's down to do it. I know he's like committed to the boys, and that means you have to kind of figure out when you can shoot, because the whole thing where Judge Dredd doesn't have a giant beard, so you do have to make these kind of decisions. But yeah, I think I can't imagine them going forward with that show and not getting him involved. And so sorry, I was just gonna say I do maintain hope that we'll see him as Dredd again in some form or another.
Well, and he's even actually was at a panel for the boys, him talking about it, saying, hey, I want to do it. He goes, I would do it, but he definitely would do it in like a, I don't want to say cameo capacity, but kind of one of those passing the torch types of moments. He'd drop in. I don't know if you ever, it's funny that I was actually talking about this show with some coworkers last week. I've never seen it, but we talked about the movie Limitless, which I've also never seen. But I was like, hey, you guys know Bradley Cooper showed up in that show, right? And they're like, no way. And so like he showed up on network TV to drop in every once in a while. I think he showed up in like 8 episodes. So I can
produced it, right?
Yes, correct. So I can totally see Karl Urban getting, a little producer scratch, obviously.
No, I think that's exactly the right approach. I'll give you another version of that, and it's something I don't know if you know about it, but like years ago on TNT, there was a series of films called The Librarian, starring Noah Wyle, which was like a kind of like an Indiana Jones kind of ripoff thing. And they went on to do like a librarian show after the movies were complete. Then the show like went for like 4 seasons, and the show is called The Librarians. And Noah Wile's character, same thing. Like he would pop up in like every other or every third episode, because he wasn't going to be in all of them, but same idea. He was like a producer on the show, and they would just bring him in from time to time. And I think that's exactly what you do with Dredd, because the thing is, this is a big enough world to have other stories, other judges. And so, yeah, you could just have Anderson and Dredd be in certain ones in like the finales and premieres and things. But do it like an anthology series, right? Have every episode be like a standalone story of different judges and even different non-judge related stories in this world.
No, I'm so down for that.
What would be interesting is to see if you do that and you bring in Karl Urban. Do you think that locks you into making the show look like this movie, or do you think? I guess what I'm trying to draw is like the connection to how. Like J.K. Simmons is playing J. Jonah Jameson again, right, in the new Spider-Man movies, even though he played him in the Raimi ones, which are a different universe. Yeah. Could you see them making a show that looks more like the Stallone film and like more close to the comics, but still have Karl Urban play Dredd? Like that wouldn't bother me, but I wonder if other people would like raise an eyebrow at it.
I think the Stallone version is just too expensive, so I think that they would go this way. Just keep it with the aesthetic of Dredd 2012, because it's cheaper. I think that's the main, and there's no reason to throw him into a $100 million an episode show. He can be in a $5 million episode show.
Yeah. I kind of just meant like could he show up wearing like the comic costume?
Oh, that's what you mean. Okay. Maybe in the middle. Yeah, I don't know. I think maybe actually I think that would bother me. Yeah, you say that it wouldn't bother you. It would bother me. I think because it's now going against what we did like about this, but what we did like about Dredd in 2012, and his interpretation of the character as an actor. I would not want him to kind of fuck with the formula, because he kind of created in a weird way. You know what I mean?
But my argument to that would be that, we said one of the amazing things about the comic book is that it's the rare comic book that has kept the same continuity over time. Right. And we did mention that what is notable about this film is that there's nothing in the movie that insinuates that Dredd is like a legend in Mega City 1.
Right.
We get some idea that other judges are aware of his reputation. And in fact, we should say, if before any, people come at us and say, hey, by the way, Judge Dredd kills judges in this film too. Yeah, crooked judges.
Yeah.
Not just judges doing their job like in the first one.
Yeah.
But the judges, when they talk about like how they are obviously kind of scared of him because they know of his reputation. But the rest of the citizens clearly just see him as another judge. So I think the insinuation is that this film could be looked at as pretty early on in his career.
Okay.
Right? Like he's not quite the Judge Dredd we know yet. And so Mega City 1, if you make that show now, let's say, I don't know where it is, and there's still like a debate of whether it's going to happen or not.
Right.
But let's say it gets going and it debuts in 2022. You could just say it actually takes place that many years after this film. And if the world is a little different and his costume's different, it could just look at it as like, well, yeah, things have evolved since then. So that's one way to look at that.
That's a good point. Yeah. I get it. I guess I just wouldn't want it to be
too different.
Yeah. Like I wouldn't want them to take too many side steps away from this.
Well, and then let me just quickly throw in, then I will say to people who do, like me, who do love this film and wish they could have gotten more of this version of Dredd, Because You're Not Alone, 2000 AD, did actually create a separate Dredd movie universe in the comics. And there have been comic sequels to this film. Right now, you can actually get 3 collections of them. The first is called Dredd Urban Warfare. The second is called Dredd Anderson, The Deep End. And the third is called Dredd Final Judgment. And those actually are drawn to look like the world of the comics. They pick up story elements from the film. There's a story about Domhnall Gleeson's character and what happened to him afterwards. The first story is kind of about a new drug that emerges in the vacuum that was created by slow-mo going away. And then the third one, Dredd Final Judgment, actually is what people were waiting for. It is seeing this version of Dredd come up against Judge Death. Obviously, I'd prefer to have movies, but at least there is something for people who want to see more of this world and more of this version of it. There are this comic series that is independent of the regular Dredd comic continuity and instead is the Karl Urban universe.
Isn't there a little bit, though, like they kind of just doing more of the same of the movie?
What do you mean?
Like, isn't that been a little bit of a critique of these little sort of comic sequels? Is that they've been just kind of doing the same type of thing that the movie did rather than take it to another level? Or
yeah, I mean,
am I
it's
incorrect
interesting.
on that?
No, the first one is about them just fighting like another, like, it's a new drug. It's
right.
The first story is very much feels like kind of a more, but I will say like, that's kind of, you read these and you get the sense that they're trying to figure out this balance of, that's the thing is like, why bother creating a whole new universe in the comics just for the movie universe instead of just telling more Dredd stories, right? And I think they're trying to think like, well, I guess people liked that the movie was kind of, smaller scale and things. So they're trying to tell similar stories. But then, as I said, you do get to like Judge Death in them. And that one definitely has a different feel, because there you're diving more into the sci-fi elements.
Well,
and they have said like, the talk about sequels was that even at the time, the filmmakers involved, it did feel like getting to Judge Death was the plan.
Yeah.
When they were like kind of looking at this as a trilogy, I think they kind of reworked their ideas to say, the second film will be even bigger, and then the third film as well, we'll finally do Judge Death. But obviously, that's not what happened.
Yeah, this one's a real shame. Not as a film, obviously, but just the reception of it or lack thereof. It sucks because it's actually, as you can hear, it's a big bummer. That put this in the if you're keeping track at home, this is the one that we definitely. I think definitely. You said it's the benchmark. I have a hard time looking at the list of movies that we are going to go through. Dredd is definitely the one to beat, and I don't know if it will.
No, you're telling me, Chris, that in the next 4 movies we've got planned, you don't think any of these are going to top Dredd?
Yes, you don't think next episode is the... Oh, man. the masterpiece. That is Wild Wild West.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, you know what? Will Smith, move over. Bring in Halle Berry, because we're going to talk Catwoman.
Yes, and then we're going to have a repeat performance of the star of our first episode. We're going to visit our boy Taylor Kitsch again for a look back at his other would-be blockbuster that same summer with Battleship. And then, and this is where I think Dredd might have some real competition, Chris. We're going to look at another cult favorite comic book character with Spawn.
Yes, Spawn. You might even get a taste of some Let's Go Leguizamo. So if you guys were a big fan.
I think it's safe to say another episode of Let's Go Leguizamo is on the horizon.
Beautiful.
But yeah, watch your back, Dredd, because we have some real winners coming up. Right now you're the best movie we watched, but who knows how long you'll hold that honor.
Speaking of real winners, do you want to know who Olivia Thirlby is married to?
Go ahead.
The Boom Guy.
I heard that she met her husband on this production, but I didn't know if it was like a stuntman or what.
Yeah, no, it's the Boom Guy. I made sure, and I looked into it, and he's legitimately the boom operator. Married Olivia Thirlby. So you know what? There's hope for us all, Trev.
Yeah, well, I mean, good for him. But yes, please, if I know a lot of high-powered Hollywood executives listen to this show, please cast her in more stuff.
Yes,
please give her
amazing.
more action roles because she kicks ass in this. Please make Karl Urban a bigger star than he is because he deserves it. And please make 20 more Dredd movies. And you know what?
Amazing.
Talk Alex Garland into getting over it and coming back. At least as like a producer or consultant.
Yeah, get him off his ivory tower and come back to when he didn't make so much money.
Yeah. So forget all this like massive success he's having. Let him make another Dredd film.
Yeah,
you gotta keep him humble. You know,
that's where the money is, baby. Well, that's the end of the show today. Follow us on Twitter at F2FPod. That's F, the number 2FPod. Like us there, like us everywhere. Also, please rate, review, whatever you do. And lastly, Trev, how about you join the tribe and hit that subscribe?
How long do you think you can keep this going?
Oh, don't tempt me. Don't test me, sorry. Anyway, thanks for listening.
Thanks.